Not long ago, a new Disney live-action remake was almost guaranteed to become a billion-dollar event. Beauty and the Beast crossed $1.2 billion. Aladdin surprised everyone by joining the billion-dollar club. Even The Lion King, despite being criticized for looking like a nature documentary where nobody smiled, earned over $1.6 billion. For Disney, the formula seemed unstoppable. Take an animated classic, type it with photorealistic CGI, cast a few Hollywood stars, market it as a beloved classic for a new generation, and watch the money roll in. But eventually, they got greedy and lazy. Fast forward to today, and the same strategy that once looked like the safest investment in Hollywood is beginning to crack. Snow White became one of Disney's most controversial and commercially disappointing remakes in years. Moana, despite being based on one of Disney's most beloved modern classics, is struggling to hit $250 million at the box office, despite costing around $250 million to make. Also, why do we even need a live-action version of a movie that is only 10 years old? Kids are already watching it on Disney+, so why would they want to watch Dwayne Johnson give a weaker performance when they can simply watch the animated version? It's not just one case. Snow White, produced on an estimated $270 million budget, earned only about $205 million worldwide, making it one of Disney's biggest recent box office disappointments. Seriously, what is this? The lead actress also made it very difficult for the movie to succeed.
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White.
Prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love.
And her acting didn't help either. The Little Mermaid, with a production budget of around $240 million, earned approximately $570 million worldwide, barely breaking even. Pinocchio, with an estimated budget of $150 to $200 million, skipped cinemas entirely and premiered directly on Disney+, receiving poor reviews and failing to generate the excitement of Disney's earlier remakes. For the first time in over a decade, people weren't asking, "How does this remake compare to the original?" They were asking something much worse. Why was this remake made at all, when we can just watch the original on Disney+? And that question is far more dangerous for Disney than any negative review. Because this isn't simply the story of a few disappointing movies. It's the story of a studio that slowly forgot why audiences fell in love with these classics in the first place. Ironically, Disney's remake strategy didn't begin as a cynical cash grab. At least, it didn't feel like one. Back in 2010, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland became a global sensation, earning over $1 billion worldwide. Disney executives looked at those numbers and saw something extraordinary. Why spend years developing original stories when audiences were willing to pay to watch stories they already loved? It was, from a business perspective, almost perfect. The characters already existed. The music already existed. Half the marketing was already done. Instead of introducing audiences to something unfamiliar, Disney simply invited them back to childhood. And for a while, it worked. Maleficent gave Sleeping Beauty's villain a fresh perspective. Cinderella proved that faithful adaptations could still feel elegant. Then came The Jungle Book. Jon Favreau's film wasn't just another remake. It genuinely pushed visual effects forward while respecting the spirit of the original. Even critics who normally hated remakes admitted it felt surprisingly fresh. Then came the real turning point. Beauty and the Beast, a film that fundamentally changed Disney's business strategy. It earned over $1.2 billion, a remake of a film most audiences already owned. At that moment, Disney stopped asking, "Should we remake our classics?" Instead, they began asking, "Which one do we remake next?" Within only a few years came Aladdin, then The Lion King. Each one earned enormous amounts of money. To Disney, the lesson was obvious. People didn't want originality. People wanted nostalgia, or so they thought. And after a few successes, they started becoming lazy. Almost every remake began following the exact same blueprint. Take the original, copy the dialogue, copy the songs, extend the runtime by 20 or 30 minutes, add a few new songs for the Oscars, give one or two characters slightly bigger roles, replace colorful animation with muted realism. Call it a reimagining. Repeat again and again and again. Eventually, audiences noticed something. These weren't really reimaginings. They were photocopies. Perhaps the biggest misunderstanding behind these remakes is Disney's obsession with realism. Animation doesn't have to obey reality. That's what makes it magical. A cartoon crab can sing, a teapot can cry, a wooden puppet can become a real boy, and Disney keeps trying to force animation into a medium that doesn't naturally support it. Look at Sebastian in The Little Mermaid. In the 1989 animation, he's expressive, energetic, and bursting with personality. In live action, he's just a crab, a scientifically accurate crab. He can't exaggerate his emotions. He can't bounce across the screen the way animation allowed him to. The same thing happened to Flounder. Instead of an adorable, expressive companion, audiences got something resembling an unusually talkative tropical fish. Also, there was no dragon in Mulan, and what happened to the dwarfs in Snow White is a crime. And now look at the shrunken nipple Maui. The writing also suffers because many remakes are almost scene-for-scene recreations of the originals. Instead of offering fresh ideas, they simply stretch the runtime with unnecessary scenes, making the pacing slower without adding meaningful character development. Moana 2026 is a good example. It follows the same story and songs as the 2016 animated film, but adds very little that justifies its existence. Rather than creating a new experience, it constantly reminds audiences how much more energetic, emotional, and magical the original animation was. Now, before someone accuses me of saying classics should never change, that's not the problem. Stories evolve, they always have. The problem isn't modernizing characters. The problem is misunderstanding what made those characters compelling in the first place. Take Mulan. The animated Mulan isn't inspiring because she's born extraordinary. She's inspiring because she isn't. She survives through intelligence, persistence, adaptability. She earns every victory. The remake changes that. Suddenly, Mulan possesses extraordinary chi from the beginning. Instead of watching an ordinary young woman become extraordinary, we watch an extraordinary person slowly realize she's extraordinary. That's a completely different story. Or look at Wendy in Peter Pan and Wendy. Rather than exploring the timeless tension between childhood and adulthood, much of her emotional journey is replaced with a more conventional empowerment narrative. Again, the issue isn't giving Wendy more agency. The issue is removing the emotional conflict that originally defined her. Even Snow White struggles with this identity crisis. The remake wants to honor the original while simultaneously distancing itself from many of the ideas that made the original famous. The result feels conflicted, unsure of what it wants to preserve and what it wants to replace. Audiences can sense that uncertainty because stories don't become timeless by accident. Every character flaw, every emotional struggle exists for a reason. When you remove enough of those pieces, you may still recognize the story, but it no longer feels like the same story. And that raises the biggest question of all. If Disney keeps spending hundreds of millions recreating classics, why do so many of them leave us feeling so little? Another biggest issue is that the classics are just one click away. 20 years ago, if you wanted to revisit Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin, you had to dig through a shelf of VHS tapes or DVDs. Today, they're all sitting on Disney+, remastered in 4K, available instantly. Entire generations of children are growing up watching the original films, not faded memories of them. They're watching the real thing, which creates a question Disney never had to answer before. Why should I watch this remake when the original is already perfect? That question haunted Moana more than any remake before it. The animated Moana only came out in 2016. It remains one of Disney's most streamed films. Millions of children still watch it every week. Then Disney announced a live-action version. Same story, same songs, same Maui. Even Dwayne Johnson returned. On paper, it sounded like one of the safest projects imaginable. But audiences looked at it and essentially said, "We're already watching Moana." The remake wasn't competing with another studio. It was competing with Disney's own masterpiece. And that's a battle almost no remake can win. The first few remakes felt exciting because nobody quite knew what to expect. Would Beauty and the Beast look magical? How realistic would The Lion King be? Could Will Smith replace Robin Williams as the genie? There was curiosity. Today, there isn't, because we've seen the pattern. We already know what's coming. There'll be photorealistic CGI, a few rewritten character motivations, an extra 25 minutes of runtime, and without surprise, nostalgia begins to wear thin. That's why Snow White became such an important turning point. The controversy surrounding the film certainly hurt it, But beneath all the headlines was a much deeper problem. Even before anyone had seen the finished movie, many audiences were already asking, do we actually need another Snow White? 10 years ago, that question hardly existed. Today, it's becoming the first question people ask whenever Disney announces another remake. Nostalgia may fill theaters once or twice, but it can't replace creativity forever. If Disney wants audiences to fall in love again, it may need to stop looking backwards and start creating the next generation of classics instead.